So throughout this week, Donald Trump has been indicating that he would not like funding to go to the United States Postal Service because he feels like this will facilitate the Democrats' plans to expand mail-in ballots to all eligible voters within the state. He feels like this plan would disproportionately boost Democratic turnout numbers and would not help Republicans. It's an interesting claim to make that I'm going to break down, but first take a look at the man say it himself.
Our system's not equipped for it. The post office is not equipped for it. And people should vote like they did in World War I and World War II. They're asking for the $3.5 billion. They're asking for $25 billion for the post office, where they're not going to get the $3.5 billion. Therefore, they can't do the universal mail-in vote. It's very simple. How are they going to do it if they don't have the money to do it?
Now, they need that money in order to have the post office work so it can take all of these millions and millions of ballots. If we don't make a deal, that means they don't get the money. That means they can't have universal mail-in voting. They just can't have it.
If they're not going to approve a bill, and the post office, therefore, won't have the money, how can you have those votes? What would mean is the people will have to go to the polls and vote. If they make a deal, the Postal Service is taken care of, the money they need for the mail-in ballots would be taken care of, if we agree to it. That doesn't mean we're going to agree to it.
If the Democrats were to give you some of what you want, which you articulated in a series of tweets in the last hour, would you be willing to accept the $25 billion for the Postal Service, including the $3.5 billion to
Sure,
handle
they give
mail-in
us
voting?
what we want. And it's not what I want, it's what the American
So it seems to be the case that Donald Trump opposes funding the United States Postal Service because he believes it will help the initiative to expand mail-in ballots to all voters. And he's opposed to expanding mail-in ballots to all voters for what seems to be two reasons. The first reason being that he believes there will be massive voter fraud that will disproportionately help the Democrats. And the second reason being that he believes that expanded mail-in ballots to all voters means that there will be an advantage to Democrats disproportionately. There's no evidence to support that first argument, so we could just throw that one away. And the second argument is a little complicated, whether or not this will help the Democrats. A study by Stanford University came out recently that actually showed that there's a neutral advantage when mail-in ballots is expanded to all eligible voters. Neither Democrats nor Republicans have an advantage over the other, and they also found that turnout increases when mail-in ballots, mail-in voting is expanded to all voters. So it seems to be the case that neither party benefits over the other one. But there are a whole myriad of factors at play here. For example, the Washington Post detailed a story outlining how 671 sorting machines have been removed from service in the United States. Now, these sorting machines process millions upon millions of letters per hour. I believe the number is something around 25 million letters are sorted per hour. And this has an impact on the election. These sorting machines are, according to the article, located or were located in high populated areas. And as we know, high populated areas, metro areas, lean Democratic. So if it's the case that these sorting machines are removed from high populated areas that lean Democratic, there will be delays in ballots for Democrats. And when ballots are late to be counted, they're disqualified. They just aren't counted if they arrive too late, despite being postmarked, despite, taking all the proper steps to get your ballot there. If it doesn't get there in time, then it's just not counted. So removing the sorting machines, it seems, is having an impact, or would have an impact, on Democrats. But that's not the only factor. The New York Times came out with an article that showed in the rural areas, ballots need to be sent to a central processing facility. And they looked at the recent Ohio primary, and what they found was that in the larger populated areas, ballots arrived late 1.7% of the time. They found that in the rural areas, it ranged from 4.1% to 12.1% of the ballots that arrived too late to be counted. So because these rural areas rely on central facilities, the ballots are later and they aren't counted. So that's another factor that's at play here. It's more likely the case that in the metro areas, their ballots will arrive on time. But in the rural areas, it's more likely the case that their ballots will arrive late and they won't be counted. So this is something that disproportionately impacts the Republicans in this case. Another reason that Republicans might be impacted, as I stated before, we're experiencing a global health crisis. And because of this global health crisis, there are certain groups that are at risk. And it's the case, according to a Pew study in 2017, that a whopping 57% of Republicans are above the age of 50. On the other hand, Democrats, only 42% are above the age of 50. And what we know about this global health crisis is that older people are at risk to getting sick and dying. And because there are more Republicans that are older and at risk, it's more likely that they lean to voting by mail so as not to put themselves at risk by voting in person. And according to what I was saying before, rural areas are more likely to have their ballots delayed, thus not counted. And we know that rural areas are Republican leaning. So if it's the case that more Republicans will be voting by mail because they don't want to put themselves at risk, and because the rural areas are more likely to be discounted because they're late, this entire plan and these variables might disproportionately impact Republicans, and Republicans might be less likely to have their votes counted. So, as I was saying before, the Stanford study says that Republicans and Democrats might not have an advantage over each other, but they make clear that that's during the period of 1996 to 2018. So it doesn't count this global health crisis. These other factors that I'm talking about, Republicans that are more old than Democrats, to put it one way, and rural areas that are more likely to have their votes discounted, these are issues that might disproportionately help Republicans. So it's unclear whether or not Donald Trump thought this entire thing through, whether or not this is something that's disproportionately going to impact the Democrats over the Republicans. So I, in short, have no idea how this is going to play out in actuality. All of this is theory and conjecture, but what it all boils down to is it seems that Donald Trump, his purpose is to kneecap the USPS, and his purpose is to intentionally hurt the Democrats and rig the election this way. But it remains to be seen whether or not this is something that's actually going to happen, whether or not it actually will play out the way that he wants it to play out. So, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Agree or disagree, let's have a conversation. And subscribe to join the political revolution against mainstream media. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, they're all bought and paid for. Independent progressive media is the path forward. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.